I'm interested to know, how did you survive? So what did you believe back then? Today I'm utterly privileged to be joined by... Who would you have been, though, without that experience? What exactly was your agenda? So if you could give someone a piece of advice, someone who's in a similar circumstance to what you were in back then, what would you say? What I really want to know is what kept you going. Do you think that has affected your parenting? I don't think you're going to like me for this question, but I am going to ask it anyway. If you could say something to your parents now, what would you say? Hello people, and welcome to the People Building Podcast. Hello people, and welcome to the People Building Podcast. So, for those of you who have been here before, you will notice that was a slightly different introduction to the show today, and that's because changes are coming, my friends. I'm switching things up a little bit. Now, some of you have been with me from way back. I first started the People Building Podcast in maybe 2008. Luckily, those old shows, I don't think they even exist out there anymore, because I ended up moving my feed, which those of you who are podcasters know something about what I just said. And so I think a lot of my early episodes just kind of vanished. Thank God, because the sound quality was probably shockingly bad. And there was also a period where I stopped podcasting completely because one of my businesses, namely NLP for Kids, which is like my petulant child, really was just taking up way too much of my time. So this kind of new version of the podcast, some of you may think that this is the only version. It's not. So you may be watching on YouTube, and that was kind of the point at which things, picked back up again. I started podcasting again. So as well as having the show on YouTube, the audio version started going out on lots of different podcasting platforms. And as of this point, I'm very pleased to announce that we are on more podcasting platforms than I've ever been on before. There are so many different ways for you to access the audio version of this show. It is crazy. Why am I telling you about this? I'm telling you about this because, a couple of important things are happening. Thing number one is that I have passed the 500,000 downloads mark for this podcast. Now that is not on YouTube. As you can see, if we are connected on YouTube, if you're subscribed here, you can see that there clearly has not been 500,000 downloads. But on the audio version of the podcast, yes, I have now exceeded 500,000 downloads, which is quite a lot. So it felt like quite a poignant time to, just switch things up a little bit, to be honest. And I really enjoy, this is one of the areas of work that I really enjoy doing. I like sharing content with you. I like coming up with ideas around the content that I'm going to share with you. And I want to do something different. So let me tell you what that is. And I will also tell you a little bit about how I've landed in the direction that I'm going in the future. So forgive me if this particular podcast ends up being a teeny tiny bit self-indulgent. But for those of you who are maybe new to the show, welcome. My name is Gemma. You're about to find out a little bit about me and why I have this podcast and why I do what I do in my life. So most of you know I am a trainer of NLP. NLP is like an alternative to cognitive behavior therapy. So it's definitely classed as an alternative therapy. It's a little bit like CBT in some ways, in that it helps a person to have strategies to improve their thought processes, intercept negative thoughts, and also to have more control over their emotional state. So I teach this to other people to an accredited level so that they can go on to become practitioners or master practitioners of NLP. I'm also a hypnotherapist, and I have a private practice where I work with people on a one-on-one basis and introduce them to these different methodologies to help them feel better when maybe they've got some different types of anxieties or worries or phobias or relationship problems going on in their lives. So anything really related to mild to moderate mental health issues. So that's one part of what I do. I also have a very keen interest in psychology. I am currently working with a university with one of my companies to hopefully give what I do within NLP, at least, a little bit more credibility. So here's the thing. I've got a few different companies that I oversee. One of them is my private practice that I've just mentioned to you. One of them is my training company where I teach NLP. So that one is People Building. That's the one that's brought you here today. NLP for Kids is a franchise where I teach other people how to use NLP specifically with children. And I oversee that team of practitioners who are classed as licensees. And then I also have another company called Superheroes, which is a non-profit company, and that allows people to access financial support if someone needs it but they can't afford it. So I'm fairly busy, as we can probably gather. And in addition, to all of that, I have kind of a crazy life. Like my family's a bit crazy. I've talked about this a little bit on this show. I have another YouTube channel. So NLP for Kids has its own YouTube channel. But I personally have my own YouTube channel, which is just my name, Gemma Bailey. And sometimes I make videos for that channel where what you can't see here is that there is lots of makeup accessories around me. I'm a little bit obsessive with collecting makeup. So sometimes I'll sit here, get ready for the day, put my makeup on and just jabber away about what's going on in my life. If you happen to be interested in my strange little life, that's the place to really get the download on what's going on, is on that particular YouTube channel. In terms of what's going on in my strange little life. So I have a half-sister who has severe special needs. If you follow me, not the company, but if you follow me personally on Instagram, so I am Gemstone03 on Instagram, or at least I think I am. You will have seen pictures of myself and my sister together. She's my big sister. And when she was a baby, she suffered a brain injury, if you like. She didn't get enough oxygen to her brain and it caused her brain damage. Later in her life, when she became kind of pre-teen, she started to suffer with epilepsy. Quite severe epilepsy. So if you're familiar with epilepsy, my sister has tonic-clonic seizures, which means that she has kind of like the worst kind, really. One of the seizures, you have the kind of physical jumping around, so she has that. So she has one of the more severe types of epilepsy, and and has had that for a significant period of time. I am the legal guardian for my sister, which means that if there are any health issues or financial things that need doing for her, then it's my responsibility to do them. She doesn't live with me, so she is in a specialist care facility, which is actually an epilepsy centre. So they're really getting on top of those seizures for her more than anybody else has in the past, which is fantastic. In addition, so we share a mum, and a few years ago, our mum started to behave differently. There were some bizarre new behaviours, and she was kind of a bizarre person already anyway. She was definitely a little bit eccentric, shall we say. So these new bizarre behaviours cropped up, and maybe one day I will give you the full download around what that was, because I think it's important. I think we are an ageing population, and I think that we need to find more solutions for things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, Huntington's disease. That's something that, as a result of what's happened to my mum, I've become super interested in, but also a very big advocate for thinking. An advocate for thinking, that doesn't sound so proactive, does it? I've become an advocate for wanting to be part of the solution, or at least early detection and prevention. Oh my goodness, people, there is so much that you can do to help safeguard yourself in the future from having these sorts of later life conditions. And none of it's rocket science, it's about having a healthy diet, getting enough sleep. I'm telling myself this at the same time, by the way. Keeping your brain active, learn a new language, do a crossword every day, go dancing, learn skills that kind of get your brain and body coordination on the go. I know I've just gone down a completely separate rabbit hole here. I apologise. But here's the thing is, so my mum got a rare brain disease called FTD, and it progressed very, very rapidly. And she has been kind of bouncing around in the end of life stages for about a year and a half. So every few months I get a call with somebody saying, it's any day now. Like, brace, 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 it's any day now. And I literally do. My understanding of how to manage my own emotional state has been invaluable, but has definitely not made me invincible. It is one thing for me to effectively give the advice that I give to other people. It is something else to employ that within myself. And I do have to sort of check it in with myself and have a little word with myself sometimes. Because amongst running those companies I told you about at the very start, and having things like, I've been speaking to a neurologist today about my sister, but it could easily have been about my mum, and new staff in the office, and 2 on maternity leave, and all of these different things happening. I think the thing that has been most challenging has been my mum's decline, and equally, if I'm being completely honest, her reluctance to exit. And there are many people that say to me, every extra day she has is a blessing. She has 0 quality of life. So it's very challenging to see a life that looks like that as a blessing. And maybe that's just because I would not want to be in that body. That would not, I mean, and you don't know. No one knows unless they're in that experience. But yeah, I wouldn't be happy about those circumstances. That is absolutely certain. So recently, there'd been another this is definitely end of life stages now. It's any day. So I was in brace mode, which for me means that anxiety can start creeping in. And so I have to become more self-disciplined in other areas of my life to just kind of hold myself in a steady, as steady as possible place. I simultaneously had someone in my life who was going through some personal challenges. And I had probably been a good support to them in the past. And as a result of being a good support, sometimes it means that people will lean on you more. Like, they know who to lean on now because you've been a good support in the past. And actually, I couldn't do that as well, and found myself quite proactively stepping back from that particular friendship, and instead asking myself if I could reshape my life right now, given the bits that I'm stuck with. That's not the right way to say it, because that's not how I feel about it. But given the responsibilities that I have got, if I could reshape my life, what would it look like? Because the thing is, sometimes I'll say to people, well, if you could reshape this situation, what would it look like? And they'd be like, well, my boyfriend wouldn't be so selfish. And it's like, but he is. So given that he's selfish, if you could reshape your life, what would you want it to look like? So I aim to be realistic when I ask myself these questions. If I can reshape my life, what would it look like? And you may be surprised to discover the answer. The answer was that I really like doing this. I really like talking to all of you. And I like talking. I like talking to people. I like talking to myself. I enjoy editing the show, although I quite often feel like I haven't got time to do it. There are definitely parts of my business that I am sick to the back teeth of. I'm sick to the back teeth of admin, of the, kind of repetitive stuff, which doesn't really need me to do it. The bits that need me, I quite enjoy. I enjoy training. That needs me. Working with clients, they need me. I quite enjoy doing that. Recording the podcast, it's all about me. So I quite enjoy doing that too. But there are other things that, like invoicing, that it doesn't need me to do the invoicing. So those are the sorts of things where I've kind of got a bit like, ugh, and it just feels like extra pressure at a time when actually I really do have quite a significant amount of pressure to be thinking about already. So I started thinking about where I would reshape things, and part of that related to this show. Now, what I'd previously planned to do, and some of you may have noticed if you'd been on the People Building website, I had previously planned that People Building was going to kind of tag team it with NLP for Kids, but focus more on teachers. And to be honest, we have enough trouble speaking to schools about NLP for Kids. I have no idea why I gave myself that additional headache of dealing with teachers. So that went out the window. Then I was approached by an HR company who said, we would really like to work with you, introduce you to our clients as part of our wellbeing package. So I've spent about a year and a half really exploring that, and my conclusion is that I don't want to. I don't want to do it. I don't want to kind of push a corporate agenda, because to be honest, I don't want to push anything. I don't want to have to sort of force people to engage. And I think that's why I like this show. You're here listening because you want to, and hopefully because the show has, helped you in some ways in the past, or offered you something either for yourself or ways in which you might interact with others in the world more successfully in order to help them. And I like that. I like the idea that you're here because something about this is good for you. I don't have to force you to be here. That's up to you. But subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Thank you. So I spent a long time considering where people building was taking me, because I'd pushed for too long to make it something that either I didn't want it to be, or it was just too competitive. There are so many people out there now offering NLP training, quite frankly, on Groupon for 50 quid, that for me to sell an accredited course for a couple of thousand, it's a bit like, how do I compete with the 50 quid people on Groupon? And of course, I can kind of throw a ton of money into marketing and go, but look, I'm the best, and I even wrote a book, and all of those sorts of things. But I don't want the fight. I can't be bothered to fight for it. And then I obviously tapped into these different industries, but again, it just felt like it was such a push. And so when I sort of sat back and I looked at people building, I'm like, okay, we've got great products. Like, I have over 80 hypnosis audios for different problems that people to this day still buy and download on iTunes. And in a load of other places. I think there are other places now. They're certainly on our website still. There are other hypnotherapists who really like my hypnosis scripts, such that they've either bought the individual scripts off of the website, off of ClickBank, or they've bought my book about hypnosis scripts. And I'm like, okay, so I know that the products are strong. I believe that the podcast is strong. I see that our YouTube numbers are going up. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you do subscribe so those numbers go up a little bit more. It's the red button that says subscribe in it, so go click that one. And also subscribe wherever else you get your podcasts. That's also fine, thank you. And I know that the podcast as a product is super strong. So here's what I decided to do. I feel like I've just taken a really long time to tell you why I've decided to do what I'm doing. Here's what I've decided to do. I've decided that from now on, from this point forth, it is all about the People Building Podcast. And here's how that works. I am going to be rejuvenating this show. You may have already seen, if you are subscribed, that things graphically have changed. There is a new logo for the People Building Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you might see we've got a nice new backdrop. There's a new picture of me. I think I've only got one arm in it, but there's a good picture of me on there. And there is more change happening. We're getting a new website. Can I also mention that I designed the website and I think it looks beautiful. So the website is going to be very podcast centric, because listen, some of you do engage with me around the show. You email me, you write comments on YouTube, all of which I love. As well as that, there will also be, it will become easier for you to go to the website and just comment on the latest show via the blog. You will be able to get transcripts of the show on the website. You'll be able to scroll through the previous videos. You can subscribe via different podcasting platforms, because all of them are going to be listed on there. And the whole website is really going to be about the People Building Podcast. Now, you might be thinking, all right, she's already spent 20 minutes talking about herself. Is this all we've got coming up in future shows? No, I promise you. I maybe should have put a warning on the front of this show to say I'm going to talk about myself rather a lot. What we will be doing in future shows is kind of a new theme. And it goes back to something that I kind of did in the very, very beginning of the People Building Podcast, which was interviewing other people. However, the other people now aren't just going to be like, let me tell you about my ebook. The people that get interviewed from this point forth are going to be, wait for it, extraordinary people. Our new series for this show is titled Extraordinary People. Now, I've already had a few people reach out to me who have shared their story, and far be it from me to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, not all of them were extraordinary, in my opinion. So not all of them have cut the mustard. Now, let me give you some context around this. Quite selfishly, and maybe incorrectly, given some of the stuff I've just told you about, and some of the stuff that you just do not know about, because I haven't shared my whole life on here historically, there are certain bits of my life that I consider to be quite extraordinary. How is it possible that little old me could end up with a mum with a brain disease who I am now completely legally responsible for her health and welfare and finances, a sister with severe epilepsy and special needs who I'm the sole guardian for, a relative who has severe alcoholism, who I am currently going through 2 lots of power of attorney for, while simultaneously running like 3 quite active companies. And I'm also doing up the garden. So, for that reason, I am putting myself into the category of an extraordinary person. Some of you might like to disagree with that and say it is not my place to put myself there. But I have, and I will continue to do so for as long as I face these challenges in life. However, there are other people who are far more extraordinary than I am. And I'm super interested in how they have succeeded in spite of that. And I think that that would be something that you would be really interested in too. And as well as talking to them about it, I am going to tell you in listener land and YouTube land the most significant things that they told us about their psychology without necessarily knowing that they were sharing something about their psychology. I will tell you why I asked certain questions that I asked of them, because it helped us to maybe dig down a little deeper. I will share with you what they have inadvertently revealed about themselves, maybe where they were incongruent at times and it appeared as if they were not being entirely truthful with us. So I'm going to be, from a alternative psychological perspective, analysing these interviews that I do and then sharing with you the key things that we all need to take from those interviews that I have conducted. So, where does that leave me so far? Checking notes, bear with me, caller. Now, something I am conscious of is what the definition of an extraordinary person might look like. Because I remember once hearing someone say, if you have broken your leg and I have cut my finger, your pain is not worse than my pain. I am still in pain, I cut my finger. So just because your injury seems bigger doesn't mean that it is more significant, because at the end of the day it's all about how we cope with whatever pains we've got. What I will say from the applications for extraordinary people is that it needs to be a good story for me to want to share it with you. So I am looking for those who have had more significant life experiences. Let me give you some examples. One of the people I'm going to be interviewing was nearly murdered. That's kind of a big deal. And as a result of that trauma, went on to develop obesity and some other issues. Now, the key thing is that they overcame those issues, and we will be studying how they got themselves back on track and became successful. Another person who is lined up for interview is a lady who started a doctorate at age 43 whilst raising children, caring for elderly parents, and also holding down a full-time job. And guess what her doctorate was in? It was in the study of success. So she's someone that we're also super interested to speak to and to find out what she discovered about success as well. So these are, in my opinion, extraordinary people. You know, they have really faced up against some very challenging circumstances. Sometimes those challenges might be more like chronic and prolonged over a period of time. Some of them have had one-time experiences, like a one-off trauma that has completely changed the trajectory of their lives and brought them to a very different place to perhaps where they had anticipated going. So these are the sorts of things that I look at and go, that's pretty extraordinary. What I will say is some people who applied have not made it onto the interview schedule because my opinion, and I'm just being completely upfront with you here, and who am I to have an opinion anyway? But in my opinion, it wasn't extraordinary enough. It was just like, well, that's life. Suck it up, buttercup. You know, like well, once upon a time I lost my job and I had to work for Domino's Pizza. I'm like, that's not trauma. That's just you lost out on being middle class for a little while. Like, get over it. Whilst on one hand, I can absolutely say pain is pain. And if you've broken your leg and I've cut my finger, my pain is not less valid than yours, or vice versa. At the same time, when I say that I'm seeking extraordinary people, I've got some sort of criteria there. Just because it was a very difficult time working in Domino's Pizza doesn't necessarily mean it's right for the People Building podcast. So I guess the thing is, in deciding what an extraordinary person is, I'm looking at their significant experiences in life and quite possibly weighing them up a little bit against my own to decide whether or not they are extraordinary enough experiences. All people are extraordinary. Don't go thinking you're extraordinary. You could be. Being ordinary is extraordinary these days, because most of us are not even ordinary. It's more sort of looking at people's life experiences and the study of how they've overcome those difficulties, which takes me on to talk to you about the thing that we're really focusing on in today's show, is resilience. Now, I have some quite fixed ideas about what resilience is, and more specifically how resilience is developed. And I work with a lot of schools and agencies relating to children and young people who, there was a bit of a trend. I don't know if maybe this worn off a little bit since COVID, but pre-COVID, resilience was blamed for everything, or lack of. And we were quite often asked in NLP for Kids to run workshops for children around resilience. And I had really mixed feelings around that, I'm not going to lie, because I don't think that resilience is something that you can wholly learn. It's not like making a cake. I mean, maybe it is like making a cake, because actually there's quite a lot of ingredients in resilience. But where with making a cake, you have like a specific order and sequence of things that you do, it will lead you to your quite exact desired outcome if you follow the right steps and the right quantities in the right order. I feel that with resilience, there is only so much work that you can do on yourself to make you a resilient person. The icing on the cake, pardon the pun, is going to be around what challenges life throws in front of you. The other thing is I think a lot of people don't even know what resilience is. I think a lot of people think resilience is your ability to like stay strong in the face of difficult circumstances. I mean, it is that a bit, but actually the real definition of resilience is how quickly and easily you get back up once you've been pushed down. It doesn't mean that you never get pushed down. When I think about resilience in the context of my own experiences in life, it has come from having some quite negative things happen sometimes and figuring my way through that and still surviving on the other side of it, and maybe then also developing some methods for knowing how to cope with something similar better next time, or just knowing that when rough stuff comes along, it's not going to last forever. You know, just having those sorts of little stories that I can tell myself that help to keep me on a more hopeful and more positive track. So speaking of things that may contribute towards becoming a resilient person, here's what I think you need. I think you need confidence, because if you lack confidence, then you're going to find it very difficult to put into action and employ any sorts of strategies that, you know, could steer you in a different direction. And sometimes when you are in a tricky spot and you need to maybe change what you're doing or change how you're thinking or have a different tactic and a different approach, that may feel like you are really going against the grain of what your brain and body want to do. You know, sometimes when we are being tested, the thing that our brain and body tell us to do is go hide under the duvet. And actually, that's probably not going to be the ideal solution. You still have to have enough confidence to get out there and face the world and face the day and crack on regardless. And that's where your mental muscles grow from. That is resilience building. So you've got to have the confidence there in the first place to be able to push through difficulty. Hope is something that I mentioned earlier. I hadn't put it on my little notes here to share with you today, but actually thinking about it, hope is super important. You need to believe that you have something worth fighting for so that you don't get completely overcome and overwhelmed by the negative experiences that happen in life. You've got to hope that you'll be okay, and you've got to have hope that things will turn out all right in the end, that it is all going to, you know, come out in the wash. Everything's going to be all right. I actually did a show about hope, so if you're watching on YouTube, I will put a link to that up here right now so that you can go and hear more about it and why hope is important. Maybe self-belief ties in with hope. I think that you have to believe in your own ability to be able to sort stuff out so that you are not at the mercy of one day life is going to offer me a better deal. Because the thing is life might not. And if it does, then there's always a fear that it could slip away again. If you have self-belief and you're kind of self-made in a way, then you know that you can always figure it out for yourself, that you can always carve a way forward for yourself that's going to take you in a better direction in the face of adversity. This, I think, is quite an important underpinning pillar when it comes to having resilience. And then overall, I would say you've got to just have a quite positive state of mind, because the more positive you are, the easier it is for you to be creative and resourceful and to think about alternative ways, reframing your circumstances, thinking about how you can problem solve your way through something to get you back into a position of feeling like you are on top of whatever these challenges are once again. So none of those things in isolation is resilience, and none of those things in isolation creates resilience. I think they are all part of the same package, and they give you a better chance of being a resilient person if you have them. But the thing that's actually going to make you resilient is having a rough time. You know, that's just the way it is. People talk about having a thick skin. I'm fairly sure I've said this here before. If you have a thick skin, it implies that maybe you've been out there doing the garden, or you're a brickie and you are a builder, and so you are physically coming into contact with the rough stuff that makes your skin thicker. You don't get thick skin from doing tasks that keep your hands baby soft. You know, if you've got baby soft hands, that you don't have the thick skin. All right, on a metaphorical level, that's what's going on there. When we talk about having an emotionally thicker skin, that happens because you rubbed up against the rough stuff. You know, you did the manual labor. You did the tasks that cause the calluses to grow and for your skin to become thicker. So I think that what's important in developing resilience is not being shy about putting yourself in situations where you might get knocked down, and not holding back from situations where you might get knocked back, because those knockbacks are the skin thickening materials that help you to develop more resilience. And then it means that you are internally and emotionally tougher for taking on other bigger things later on down the line. And I'll be honest with you, this is me singing a very different song to what me 20 years ago would have said. I mean, maybe I'd have said it, but I wouldn't really have felt it. I would have been incongruent with it. And I'll give you an example. When I was, back in the day, working as a manager of a private day nursery, there was a lovely member of staff, we shall call her Charlotte, because that was her name. And you already know, with a Charlotte 20 years ago, like, that's telling you something about her social status, which was very different to mine. My little rough upbringing in the hood, in the ghetto. I grew up on a council estate. I worked hard to get my diploma to be able to work with children. And someone said to me the other day, like, working with children, that was a cop-out. And, you know, maybe it was, but for what I had available to me at the time, it was the best that I could do. And I really did do my best at it. And I ended up doing pretty well. So I was fast-tracked to becoming a manager for the largest day nursery corporation in the United Kingdom. And one of the employees there was this young lady called Charlotte. And she came from a wealthy family who really took care of their kids, and that is not a bad thing. Please don't think that that's what I'm saying. But I think because she'd had maybe quite a sheltered life, and certainly a very fortunate life. You know, first car was a new car bought for her, deposit put down on her house by her parents, that kind of stuff. Whilst I was her manager, and I was like grafting away to be able to afford my monthly car payments just to get myself to work. And I felt really fucking resentful about that. I'm not gonna lie. That was how I felt. It felt like life was unfair. And, you know, not just that her relationships were positive, and her parents really cared about her, and they were normal. And it was just like, like, she was someone that could afford to work in childcare for the love of it, because the money was secondary. Whereas for me, I was working in childcare for the love of working with children, but my first salary was £8,200 a year. And that was not easy to live off of, even back then. So I felt very resentful towards Charlotte, but one day I noticed that she had developed some skin condition where what's it called? Maybe dermatitis, something like that. And it was on both of her hands. And it looked like her skin was falling off. And yeah, looked pretty uncomfortable, to be honest. And it was stress related. And it took me a while to reframe my beliefs that I was carrying around she's got it easier than I have. And it's not fair. And I wish I had it that easy, because what I realised was something that for me might be, by comparison to all the other stuff, quite a low level problem, for her was really significant, because it seemed like she'd missed out on the benefits of having tough stuff happen in life. You can learn so much, not just resilience, from having difficulties in your life. And at the time that you're having them, it might feel like the best thing in the world is if they were not there. But if you can become the kind of person that sees a silver lining around a cloud, then you can really start to enjoy life a lot more and get a lot more benefits from living it, even when it's really difficult. And that's what these extraordinary people are going to be teaching us, is that not just they've made it work regardless, aren't they great, but how we can all take a difficult time, take the lemons and turn it into lemonade. That's what we're going to get from this series of extraordinary people. So I am really excited to be talking to these people, studying these people, analysing these people, sharing my analysis with you, getting your feedback on their circumstances and what you've learned from them, what they've offered to you. I will be encouraging you to reach out to them directly and to not just thank them, but to tell them what's been important and significant in what they've shared with you. And I really want to get a good buzz going around this Extraordinary People series. So I am, what's the word I need? I'm imploring you to join me in this upcoming series and to celebrate these wonderful people who are going to be wearing their hearts on their sleeve. And listen, I'm not going to be their therapist. So I'm going to ask questions that I might ask in a therapeutic scenario, but my intention is to show up and just be quite entirely organic. Is that the word? I want to show up and just be me and chat to these people and be curious about them. And if it's moving, then there may be a little tear in my eye. If it is, if I disagree with them, you may hear that things get heated. If they, I think, didn't take responsibility in some ways, I will be holding up a mirror to them. So I'm going to be using my NLP questioning techniques to really get to the heart of what's going on for them. But I also am going to be mindful of not turning it into a therapy session at the same time. This is about having good conversations with people, and then we'll do the analysis together afterwards. With all of that being said, if you are not already subscribed to the People Building Podcast, then please subscribe via whichever podcasting platform you are currently listening on. If you are watching on YouTube, you can hit the red subscribe button and click the notifications bell so that you get notified when this very first episode of Extraordinary People comes along. Please do, I would appreciate it so much if you could leave a review for the podcast and maybe tell a couple of friends about it. You know, if there's anything that you've listened to in previous shows where you thought, yeah, that was actually really quite helpful, like tell a friend. 3 is the magic number, I like to think. So maybe tell 3 friends, because if you tell 3 friends, then the show gets bigger, and then there is more people watching and listening, and the number of the number of extraordinary people that I end up speaking to will grow, and the quality of the extraordinary people will grow greater. And then by the next time I see you, speak to you, with any luck, the new website should be there. I'm saying it should be there. I don't know how long these things take. It's well underway. So it's most definitely a work in progress. And then I will be inviting you all to get yourselves over there, take advantage of all of the stuff that will be on offer for you, and to start joining the conversation with the extraordinary people that we've been speaking to on each of our shows. So for now, however, that is everything. I appreciate it was a slightly different show today, because lots of it was giving you updates and talking about myself a little bit. But there was some stuff in there about developing resilience, and if that sounds like it was meaningful to you, then please do leave a comment in the comments box as well, if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening on a podcasting platform, then just leave a comment in the review. As you do the review at the same time, that would be fabulous. But for now, thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I look forward to seeing you all again on the next show, where we will be talking to an extraordinary person. See you all then. Take care, everyone. Bye. The People Building Podcast was produced and edited by Gemma Bailey. You can find out more information about our products and services on peoplebuilding.co.uk, where you can also join in the conversation around specific episodes. The information, opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. It should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, we do not endorse, approve, recommend or certify any information, product, process, service or organisation that is presented within the podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced